Back in the day, they were the big blue machine, winning elections for 42 straight years. But Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party has won just 2 elections in the last 33 years. What has happened to this once proud institution? Joining us now for their thoughts, Rod Jackson. He's the former PC member for Barrie. Pam Hundle. She is the PC candidate in Brampton-Springdale in both the 2011 and 2014 Ontario elections. She's also a VP of the Ontario PC Party. Maddie DiMuccio is here. She's the Newmarket Town Councillor and a columnist with the Toronto Sun. And John McAtischen, president of the Bradgate Research Group. And we're happy to have you 4 around our table for this discussion this evening. Want to remind our viewers that our producers Mark Brozens and Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud are hosting a Twitter chat right now on this topic. So chime in with your thoughts, and you can use the hashtag AgendaTVO. 2 items of business off the top. First of all, Mr. Jackson, why are you spending your 44th birthday with us here on TVO instead of at home having fun?
I can't think of a better way to spend it than with you.
I can think of many, but we're glad you chose us.
Happy to be here.
Second of all, let me ask you all to look at the monitors here in the studio because we're going to relive election night, sadly, for you guys a little bit here. Mr. Director, if you please, this is what Ontario looked like after June the 12th. Lots of orange and red in northwestern Ontario. If we go to northeastern Ontario, a little patch of blue, that's Vic Fideli and North Bay, but the rest of it is orange. If you go to the southwest, yes, the Conservatives are still big in the rural parts of southwestern Ontario with some patches of orange and red in that part of the province. In Hamilton and Niagara, that's Tim Hudak's seat, but otherwise it's all orange and red. In the 905, that ring of ridings around Toronto, yes, still some blue there in the rural parts, but in the suburban parts, less and less than the time before. In the 416, you can't find any blue at all. They've had 1 election victory in the 416, Doug Holliday in Etobicoke Lakeshore, in the last 4 elections. You can't give away 100 seats and expect to win. Keep going. Central Ontario, well, yes, the PC party's still strong in the rural parts of Central Ontario. And in Eastern Ontario, again, same story. In the rural parts of Eastern Ontario, and some ex-urban seats as well, the PC party still strong with some splotches of red in that map as well. And that's what your province of Ontario looks like after the results of June the 12th's general election. Rod, to you first. On election day, before the polls closed, what did you think was going to happen that night?
Well, I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was. I mean, I thought, you know what, it's going to be a little tight for us. Things weren't going our way. I didn't feel very good about going into election night. I thought we would pull through with at least the number of seats that we went into the election with. I didn't think we'd lose any. So yeah, to lose my own seat and to see a couple of my colleagues go down, like Rob Leone and Rob Milligan, just to name a couple, Jane McKenna, it was a little shocking.
You won by 2,300 last time,
yeah,
and then lost by 2,500 this time.
Yeah, I will say this: I increased my vote over last elections, but that's really telling, right? So I actually was able to increase the number of people that voted for me this time. Yet there was about 2,000 or 3,000, probably about 3,000 new voters that didn't go our way at all. They went completely the other direction. So,
Pam, you were running for election for the second time. What was your thinking on election day before you knew what the results actually were?
You know what, I was still hopeful, but I knew it was getting tight, and just through some feedback and through the polling and things like that. So we were staying optimistic, and we were focusing on our ID'd vote, which was very strong, and we did a great job at that, but we knew it was getting really tight. So
what had you been hearing at the door in the last week?
At the door, again, I was hearing a lot of people were unsure. So that was making me a little nervous. They still hadn't made a decision, even a few days before the election.
So you thought, possibly I could win this seat?
I thought possibly. I was spending a lot of time speaking to them, so on an individual level, they were fine, but overall, in terms of voting and their overall views of the leaders and the political parties, there wasn't a lot of interest.
John, I want to focus on what I think most observers have said was the turning point of the campaign, and that was Tim Hudak's pledge in Barrie, I think, in your city.
Yeah, I won't forget that.
Scene of the crime.
Yeah.
To eliminate 100,000 positions from the broader public sector. Is it your view that that was the turning point of the campaign?
Yes.
And why was that decision made?
Why that?
To make that announcement?
I have no idea whatsoever, because I had absolutely nothing to do with that campaign.
Do you agree with the policy?
As it was written, as it was announced, as it was re-announced and evolved over time, no. Not the way it was done, no. It was bad policy at the wrong time by by a bad spokesperson. So it was just wrong across the board. It gave the Liberals and the NDP, and certainly the special interest groups, the opportunity they were looking for to say all the negative things about Tim Hudak that people may have been wondering about, and it allowed them the space to make that credible.
Maddie, when you heard the 100,000, what did you think?
Well, I thought, I mean, I can understand that I was really, what did I think? I wanted to bury my hands in my head, because really, you don't run a campaign on policies or ideology. You run it on what Kathleen Wynne did, and that is called strategy. And I respect the ideology that Tim Hudak has, and I respect the PC movement of smaller government, but I just don't think if you're going to run that on a campaign in a general election as opposed to a leadership election, you are going to polarize, and that's what happened here. And so I also wanted to say that this, to me, as a PC member, this was not so much a PC campaign as much it was a Hudak campaign. There's a distinct difference between the two.
We'll get into that in a second. Were you there at the scene of the crime, as it were, when the announcement was made?
Yeah, I was standing right shoulder to shoulder with Tim when he made the announcement.
Did you know it was coming?
I found out late the night before that it was coming.
How did you find out?
I got a phone call
from
Alan Sakatch, who's the director of communications for the media guy for the party, and he just gave me a heads up. Tim called me earlier in the day. They said they would call me and give me a briefing later that night because there's going to be a big announcement.
What was your reaction?
When I found out, I was a little surprised. I mean, this is something we hadn't spoken about in caucus. Caucus really hadn't had a say in it. I think probably the messages John probably alluded to would have been tempered somewhat. I think if he had to realize that there would have been sort of the real sort of stick tightening that there was. I mean, we were all gripping our sticks pretty tight as it was, and then when he went in there and made that announcement in Barrie, it was at a country club. I mean, it was. And I'll take some responsibility for that, because we didn't know what the announcement was, and it was the cheapest room available. I don't know what it was going to be. It would have been somewhere else probably, but it was shocking. I mean, that 100,000 jobs, and it was made next to me. It really didn't make life easy for me. I got bludgeoned with that at the debates.
But it wasn't just the policy; it was the way the policy was done. Yeah. And I'm going to suggest that moment showed both the worst moment in the campaign and one of the best moments. Okay, so I say the worst moment in that the team wasn't briefed, the candidates didn't know, the troops hadn't been told. And that's something that we've really been doing for the last 20 years, is making sure our people know what's going on in a campaign if the policies haven't been out well in advance. But so that's the worst moment from the perspective of the way the campaign was run. From the positive, and hats off to the two people here and the other 105 people that were with them shoulder to shoulder, being shocked and appalled in various degrees when it came out, that they didn't go off the reservation. It could have been a lot worse if as we've seen in other campaigns, candidates had gone out there and saying, I'm going to quit being a candidate, the party's wrong. There was none of that. There was no hoopla. John Tory went through a degree of that in 2007. That didn't happen from this team of candidates. So hats off to the team and to the party that, hey, my leader looks like he's either knows something brilliant and we're going off to glory, or we're going off a cliff, but I'm not going to be the one to argue with him.
Let me get Pam. How did you find out?
Again, it was just an announcement. I wasn't briefed on it.
You didn't get a heads up the day before?
No. We were sent emails, regular emails but it was a quick email the night before, as Rod just, but the biggest thing here is, how do you communicate such a complicated policy in such a short period of time? It's almost impossible, and especially when you're dealing with, the type of demographics, when I'm speaking from my riding alone or some of the ridings around me, to make people understand something that's just far too complicated to explain. Fundamentally, it might have made sense, but it's not easy to explain in a short period of time.
The other part that was very damaging, though, is it also fed into this giant machine, right? There's this giant publicly funded union machine that was ready to go at us.
I think they call it the union hate machine, actually.
Well, it was a hate machine.
Yeah,
I mean, these guys were, no matter what was announced, no matter what happened, whether there was a 100,000 job, that 100,000 announcement or not, those, tens of millions of dollars worth of VADs that were paid for by public sector unions mostly, were going to come at us. And they were going to say that we were closing hospitals and firing teachers and firing, any public servant. They would have said that anyway. That stuff was going to come at us anyway, and that was extremely damaging. And that's a huge problem in Ontario right now. We're one of the only provinces that allow this sort of third-party advertising to happen without any limit. So in my campaign, we raised and spent the limit. Yet, I was outspent in Barrie easily 10 times. How do you overcome that as a candidate, that has all these spending limits? And
well, but yeah, and I hear what you're saying, but in all fairness, and there might be some flaws for sure in the system, we can have that discussion, but in all fairness, if you are going to run on a wedge issue, and if you're going to run against the big monster of unions, then you're going to have to be prepared for that kind of attack. So we're not surprised today. We can't sit here and say, well, it was their fault. It's our fault. I mean, it's really, the other thing too is that, and I wanted to touch on something that Pam had said, was about the announcement and how she, as an executive member of the committee, I'm shocked to hear that she found out just the night before, because I was at that convention, and I'm sure all of us were at that convention last February, and I don't recall that policy. And this is going back to the grassroots, and I'm going to go a step further and say that I do believe that Tim Hudak went rogue on the party. I mean, the party membership voted and agreed to a set rule of policies. And that campaign was supposed to take place. And I had sat in on some of these focus groups in Toronto. I sat in on them. And I recall very well what we were going to run on. And then, the night before, you find out something extremely, that will really cut the campaign. I mean, that just completely changed the...
So, Pam, where'd this go? You're on the executive of the party, right?
Yes.
So where did this policy come from?
Well, again, I mean, this is something that was, I'm assuming, was developed during the campaign. This, again, as Maddie just mentioned, we did a lot of white papers. One thing that we can say our party was very good at is consultation, touring, having MPPs consult with constituents, and all of these roundtables to come up with a platform that people could relate to or we thought was practical and would be appealing to the wider public. Where this came from, this is something that perhaps was in the works, or maybe it was a thought that was put on the back burner, and then they decided, hey, we need something strong and compelling or controversial, but it just totally backfired.
If you'd won, John, people would have said, boy, that Hudak's brilliant. He pulled this out of, he pulled this arrow out of his quiver halfway through the campaign without any consultation.
Absolutely.
He went with a hunch and it worked.
Yep.
Except it didn't work.
Not at all.
So you got to wear that, I guess.
Yeah, and from a policy that there are some merits to the policy. It's not a bad policy, but in a policy that said, and look, I'll tell you my personal story. I heard on the radio 100,000 job cuts. I'm doing cartwheels. I'm going, I might actually phone and get a sign. That's how excited I was. But then as time went on, what happened next? That's only 1 in 12. So I didn't realize that we had that many employees, 1.2 million employees. So we're only talking 1 in 12. Okay, well, fine, 1 in 12. All right. Attrition over 4 years. So no one's actually getting laid off or fired. It's attrition. Oh, okay. And then as time went on, and not nurses, and not teachers, and not classroom assistants. But the problem was, they didn't say that the first day. If Tim Hudak would have said, while standing next to Rodney at that platform, and said, "This is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it," there would have been no room for all the fearmongers to come out and go, "Every single person is about to be laid off." It was only going to be the people retiring anyway. Instead, all of, not 1 in 12, but 1.2 million people, plus their spouses, plus their children, plus their cousins, the parents afraid they were going to move back home. 3.5 million, for the sake of argument, Ontarians were scared by that policy needlessly.
Yeah, and to Tim's defense, I mean, part of the reason I think no one went off the reservation is because we were aware there was going to be some bold ideas and there were going to be some controversial things that went out there and pushed the envelope to challenge people to talk about it and to lead the campaign. And everyone through this campaign was talking about Tim. And
the Tories set the agenda in this campaign. There's no doubt about it.
We set the agenda. And that, I mean, I think it went too far. And to Tim's credit, when he did stand next to me that day, he was very clear that it wasn't going to include nurses, doctors, or police officers. The rest of it was left out there. And it didn't stop the nurses or the police officers from spending millions of dollars worth of advertising saying that they're going to get fired, which was completely false. I mean, it was I've never seen more blatantly misleading advertising ever, I don't think, during election campaign.
But I want to pick my metaphor carefully here. Yeah. You gave them the baseball bat to beat you over the head with.
No doubt about it. Absolutely. I think that without that 100,000 jobs announcement, I mean, we could have said something like, we're going to trim the fat, we're going to make sure the public sector, even Don Drummond says that that the public sector is something that we need to take a good look at and see whether it's accomplishing what it needs to accomplish. There's a lot of things that could have been said that people, stop the gravy train. Work for Rob Ford. God forbid to bring up the name. But that's the kind of commentary we needed to have and discussion we need to have. Without that 100,000 jobs announcement, I'd be sitting here as a current MPP. I'm 100% convinced
Well,
of.
and potentially a cabinet minister.
And the other thing too, and I wanted to say something that you said, John, and you, Rod, as well, is that you were sitting at this table, and in about 5 minutes, you tried to explain a very complex policy that most people have no idea about. Same with the Million Jobs Plan, and the math involved. These are complex things that you don't run a campaign. You do that when you're in office. Those are policies that you run on, that you put in place, but you don't run on that, and then you certainly the night before try to explain a very complicated process. And again, it's a dividing issue. So I understand that Tim Hudak tried to mobilize his base, but what he's also doing by announcing something like that, he's also mobilizing the Liberal and the NDP base, and he's motivating them to come out, and it worked, because we know now through the numbers that I believe
There were more NDP votes and less conservative votes.
Exactly. So it's if you're going to, like you said, get the baseball bat and hit it over the head with someone, well,
frankly, I don't think you can use job and cuts in the same sentence. And frankly, I think some things are better left unsaid. And I think if that's something we had backroom conversations about and said, this is something we have to work as a party, should we be elected, to start trimming the fat and reducing the size of government. The average person doesn't, need to know that. What's important to the average person is what's happening in their home in terms of jobs and taxes and the everyday challenges.
And not just that, Pam, I would also add that, so if you want to mobilize your base, and if you want to do what the Rob Ford thing, because we all care about the pocketbook, then instead of saying we're going to cut jobs, public sector jobs, you say we're going to make government effective. We're going to make sure that your taxes are used effectively and efficiently.
You were too concretely honest in the campaign.
It's communication. It's the way you communicate the message. That's what it is.
Tim can't be blamed for not telling the truth. He told the truth through this campaign.
A little too harshly.
Well,
too harshly.
And I'm going to challenge what you just said, because if Tim Hudak told the truth to the members, as he did last February, and he sat in front of the members and said, we are a grassroots organization. We are starting this party as a grassroots organization. We have focus groups. We want to listen to you. And we saw some of the things that happened in this campaign, and it was nothing like a grassroots campaign run. And so that is the other thing. Was he truthful? And that's a question that you need to put out there.
You guys all know Paul Wells, who's a very fine writer for Maclean's, and he wrote an analysis of the PC party loss on Election Day, which touched on a lot of issues. And we're going to read a little excerpt of that right now, which we're entitling Bill Davis's Ontario. Here we go. Rule 1 in Bill Davis's Ontario is, you should appreciate this, he's from Brampton, right, Pam? Don't get on people's nerves. But there are a lot of Conservatives in Ontario who have forgotten the province was ever Bill Davis's. There are a lot of people who accreted around Mike Harris in 1990, John, you might be one of them, like barnacles. They've never really grown up. They were at Trinity College or Upper Canada College or Hillfield Strathallan or some other dreary Anglo-Saxon dumping ground in the early 80s when Ronald Reagan came on TV and fired the air traffic controllers, and they've spent the rest of their lives looking for an excuse to play Ayn Rand Home Edition. It even worked in 1995 when Mike Harris came back from his 1990 drubbing and years of the worst recession, combined with the worst government Ontario had seen in ages. Harris's common sense revolution worked because by 1995, thanks to Bob Rae, common sense seemed revolutionary. Here's the question, gang. Do you folks around this table understand that it still is Bill Davis's Ontario? Look at John, you're getting disgusted already, but hang on. Here's the question. And you can't run on a harsh, right-wing, union-hating, firing 100,000 people and seeming to relish it kind of platform. You get that?
That nobody, intended to run on that. I would argue no one ran on that. I would argue no one suggested we run on that. And I would absolutely say that I can give you no shortage of columnists who before and after has said that that's what was about to happen or did happen. But it's not true.
So, all right, let me get reaction, then I'll come back to all of you.
One of the quick thing is that one of the pamphlets that I got at my doorstep from one of the unions that I won't mention on air said this was their catch line. Tim Hudak, cuts first. Okay, I couldn't argue with that. Second part, kids last. As a parent, I couldn't be more offended by that. I called the party and said, tell me we're going to sue these people after the campaign. Because there was a line, and whatever the line is, these people have gone way, way past it.
Yeah.
With the state of Ontario the way it is now, fundamentally people do relate to that Mike Harris approach. However, it's that policy-wise, but Bill Davis approach is what people are looking for. because there has to be a balance.
What does that mean?
That means take the human side of things and look at it from the eyes of the average person, and how much Ontario has changed since the Bill Davis to Mike Harris to where we are today. You have to look at the communities and demographically and what we're facing today in the cities.
Rod, just before I ask you, let me take 30 seconds too, because we have a lot of new Canadians who watch this program who will not know that Bill Davis was the longest serving Premier of Ontario in the 20th century. He governed for 14 years. He was the, I guess, what was it? Drew, Frost, okay, like fifth, I guess, Premier in the Tory dynasty that governed the province for 42 years, and seemed to have an intuitive understanding of where the middle of the province was, which was where most of the voters were, and could tack left when need be and tack right when need. You're arguing with me already, John, but the fact is he won 4 straight elections. So the premise is you can't be way out on the right and expect to win. You've tried that since 1987 and it's worked twice. Does the party have to reevaluate what it means to be a conservative in Ontario in the 21st century?
I don't think that being a big C or small C Tory are mutually exclusive to one another. So I kind of agree with Bill Davis in a certain extent, but I think we need to look to the future here. So, we've got to go back to our roots. The answer is right under our nose. We've always been the party of family and community. That's what our whole foundation of our party has been built on. The Liberals do something very well that we don't do very well. It's actually speak to people's hearts. We try to speak to people's minds all the time, to Maddie's point, where we're trying to have logical, complex ideas pass on to the electorate in a broad sense. It doesn't work. We're not wrong. Our approach isn't wrong. The communication part of it is wrong. We're not appealing to people's hearts. We're not getting to their minds through their hearts. The Liberals do it very well.
If you want to appeal to their minds, you put out a platform where the math was all wrong. Even the appeal to the mind wasn't accurate.
To Rod's point, the mistake was talking about math. Yeah. In a province where the Liberals have had the lowest math standards in our history. So let's not even go there. The reality is, Rod's bang on. We should be talking to people heart to heart.
But you're clearly, I mean, I saw your facial expressions while I was reading all that, and your eyes were dancing up to the ceiling.
Because you talk about Bill Davis's 4 wins, you don't talk about his loss.
He never did lose.
Bill Davis lost in 1985 when he didn't take the hit, right? We're going to go to a ball game tonight, Steve, and you know the reality is which pitcher wins and which pitcher loses. To tell the truth of the 1985 election.
He didn't run in 85.
Right. Miller was the closing pitcher, but the one who got him there, who got the party there, was let's announce a policy that is going to offend a big chunk of Ontario and put us in the wilderness for the next 10 years.
This is the full funding of separate schools.
Crazy that you would announce a policy that you did not consult with anybody in the party, anybody in caucus, unilaterally as leader, announce a policy, and then that kills us for 10 years. That's the Bill Davis. That's part of the Bill Davis legacy. Absolutely. Legacy. And to be fair, that then provided the space for the party, because I was there in those days, in 87, where we then had another loss with another good leader. We had Miller and then Grossman, good leaders, and then the party went, we're so badly beaten, we're not sure if we're done. The party didn't do anything for 2 years except re-examine itself, create a constitution from nothing, come up with one member, one vote, and created a brand new system that would have us have the biggest consultation.
Okay. But here's the fundamental question here, Maddie, to you on this. Does this party have to recapture its progressive conservatism, or is the future still being a small c, much more right-wing, to hell with the red Tories kind of party? What is the future?
Excellent question. When you talk about the Bill Davis years, they were 42 years of fantastic governing. It was central right. And it appealed to many people because, like Pam and Rod said, it talks to our hearts. And people, we didn't talk about healthcare in this election. We didn't talk about education. We didn't talk about the environment. We didn't talk about the things that actually do matter to us. So Christine Elliott said something interesting today, which I very much disagreed with.
Oh.
Yes. She said that we have to start...
Just remind everybody, she threw her hat into the ring today. She's running for the job.
So she said we have to start from the bottom up, and I disagree, because we've actually had a fantastic run as PC. The PC party is a fantastic party. If I was running a leadership campaign, I would be saying we've always been a great party. And it goes back to what I said earlier in the show about this is a QDAC campaign, not a PC party campaign, because the PC party campaign had great policies when we were at that convention. We were a group and we were united. Okay?
So the leader blew it.
The leader blew it, and you know what? We have all, like I said, 42 years built. This is a party that has the greatest history of building highways, subways, schools, hospitals. We've got that record. Ontario is because of the PC party. So we need to build on that.
The party's not bad, it had bad management.
It had bad, but that's what I said.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
the Hudak bunker, and that's really what it was.
Yeah.
We cannot run a party like that. So do we have to start from the bottom up? No. Do we have to look into ourselves? We have to look into.
We should always look into ourselves.
We should always look at, but we have to look at the management. And you know what? Right now, what I'm seeing, I'm not really liking. I'm not liking how this is going.
Okay, Rod, though, but again, the bigger question of whether or not this party can ever win again if it wants to wrap itself in hard right-wing policies that make it feel warm and fuzzy with the grassroots, but you can't broaden the base of that kind of party and therefore you're going to lose again, or do you have to sort of recapture a more pragmatic middle? I'll get to you in a second, John.
I can't believe how many false premises you can put in the one question.
Well,
Go
I'm
ahead.
just looking at history, but you keep going.
Oh,
Go
I got
ahead.
history on my side.
You know, I think that our party, like I said, needs to stick to the fundamentals, which is really focusing on families and communities and what makes those strong. So, you know, we've been kind of working around the edges on this, talking about jobs, talking about hospitals, talking about education. They're all very important things, but they all come back to the fundamental, which is your family and your community and what makes those strong. And when people start to realize that PCs have a heart, that we actually care, we have compassion. You look at our caucus, I mean, alone, you know, you have this stereotype of us, of, you know, the backroom guys smoking cigars, the old boys club. Yeah, you look at our caucus and it's, you know, majority of them are people from their mid-30s to their mid-40s with young families like me. I mean, to me, we are the party of the future. You look across the aisle, you get a much different perspective on the type of people that are in the Liberal Party, right? There's some young people too, don't get me wrong, but you know, we are the party of the future. I honestly believe that. I think that
Are we going to have a discussion on candidate selection and nominations? Because I'd love to go down that road.
Well, you got,
Yeah.
We should remind everybody you tried to run for the party and you were prohibited from doing so.
And I don't think that was.
You have to keep the bad radicals out of the process. Every party will tell you that, Maddie.
Pam.
I think speaking from a ethnic point of view and from a riding that's extremely ethnically diverse, I think if you
Your
look
riding,
at
Brampton,
Springdale, and many ridings in Brampton and in the Peel region, fundamentally, our principles do match those of many new immigrants and different cultural backgrounds.
absolutely.
Fundamentally,
Probably better.
family, strong values, being fiscally conservative and
Federally,
responsible.
the Conservatives win these seats.
Absolutely. But here you've got a gap in communication and reaching out. And many of the people who live in Ontario today have never been under a PC government because they came here during a time when it's only been Liberal. That's all they know.
Right.
So this is a huge challenge for us.
Do you think, though, the party has to get more into... I mean, the party is called the Progressive Conservative Party. I think it's fair to say that for almost 20 years, it has been running as the Conservative Party. Does it have to get in touch with its progressive side?
I think we did a fantastic job, I have to say, in the last few years to outreach to more communities. And in the defense of Tim Hudak for this reason, he did tour a lot. He did make efforts, concerted efforts to reach out to ethnic communities. So I think our name is well known there, the PCs, and people were looking for that change, but they just didn't understand us. There's some type of a gap where they just can't seem to connect with us.
Message or messenger?
I'd say messenger.
I would agree with that. I do a lot of work with the ethnic community in the GTA. I have a lot of those contacts there. And I've always asked them, what is it about the PC party that, I mean, they love Harper, but they can't stand the PC party. But it's actually Tim Hudak that they don't like. You will ask them, I don't like the leader. And the leader, and it is the messenger.
The leader was a lot better this time, Maddie.
It's just the
If you compare 14 from 11,
it's the
leader
trust
was a lot
issue,
better.
and I spoke about this in the last show that I had when we talked about it. I talked about the qualities that makes a leader and what's important. I know we're going to get into that in the next segment of the show about that. But it really, you know, when you've got, like Pam says, you've got ethnic people that are not really sure, then the messenger becomes even more important. And those qualities are far more important in many ways because they may not understand the policies, but but they will trust the leader. So that, I think, in that community, in the 905, the leader is far more important in that.
Let me try this with you. The Kathleen Wynne Liberals pretty clearly moved that party to the left.
They are the most left-wing party in Ontario today.
Okay?
Absolutely.
In which case, there's a lot of room in the middle that got vacated when they did that.
Well, that's where the NDP is today.
Well, okay, from the center left. But you could argue that there's a whole lot of room in the center right that's empty now because the Liberals vacated it. They may want to move back into it, but they vacated it.
Yep.
And so a lot of people who are way smarter than me about these things said, wow, if that room is there and there's voters there, why doesn't Tim Hudak throw some bones to the Red Tories and try and get them back on side and move into that space? He didn't. Was that a mistake?
Yes.
So he should have.
Well, yes, because yes, but also, let's go back to simple math, right? Tim Hudak in the last 2 elections got virtually the same number of votes, 1.5 million. The 2 campaigns that you talk about, which I'm curious as to why you don't want to look at a winning formula for the Conservatives, but the 2 campaigns we won, the highest one in '99 would have been 500,000 more, so almost 2 million. Mm-hmm. In the same year, in 2011, when there was a federal and a provincial, Stephen Harper got 2.5 million. So the Harris government got 500,000 more than Tim. Harper, in the same year, 2011, got 1 million more.
Yeah, clearly there are people who are prepared to vote Conservative.
So I'm just saying, but in the world of, if you look at that math, it's like, try to go and swing how many hundreds thousands from the Liberals or from the NDP, or why are between 500,000 and 1 million Conservative voters in Ontario sitting home, not being motivated to come out and support our party? And I'd suggest that's where the bigger issue is. So if you want to, for me, I believe in fishing where the fish are.
Okay, so what's the answer to your question? You posed a good question. What's the answer?
So I think it's more broad-based than that, because I could simply say, well, then just appeal to those people alone. But I don't believe if you want to be a government, you should ever only talk to one group. You want to represent all the people. So in the what was Bill Davis, I got to tell you, as a back in the time when being a right-winger was a very small group in Ontario, I used to applaud at youth conventions and campus conventions when Bill Davis gave a speech, because he was amazing. He was great. You could totally disagree with him on everything on policy and still be a supporter of his. Mm-hmm. And I was singing the campaign song from 1981 the other day, because it's just crazy and they spent so much money you can't get out of your head ever. But at the end of the day, our party needs to reach out to everybody. And Christine Elliott announced her campaign today, and she said it really well. One of the things she said in her announcement was, in trying to be pigeonholed, left, right, red, blue, I'm a Conservative. That's what she said. I'm a Conservative. Now, you want to talk about policies and everything else? I think you'll hear a lot about the heart from her campaign.
I want to do a fast follow-up on that.
Sure.
Because I did an event this morning, a question and answer session at a film screening where Bill Davis was present. And I asked him that question. I said, Mr. Davis, are you a Conservative? You know what his answer was?
No.
I'm a progressive Conservative.
Yeah. Okay.
And it just reminded me that I wonder if there's this whole part of your heart that you guys are forgetting.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, but I also think, we don't do ourselves a service when we start talking about red Tories and blue Tories and small C and big C Conservatives. We are progressive Conservatives. There's nothing to be ashamed of there, right? We need to embrace that part of it. The progressive side of it may have been lost a little bit, but we're the only party where people try to label us within our own party. And we don't talk about people talking about, blue Liberals or red Liberals. I mean, it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen with the NDP. Why does it happen with us? We need to focus on what we do best, which is really have good policy that gets our province and country back on track.
Pam, tell me about this. Stephen Harper and I think Jason Kenney overwhelmingly have managed to, on behalf of the federal Conservative Party, go out and really establish some, we'll see how long lasting, but certainly for a pretty long time, into communities that a generation ago never would have considered voting Conservative. Why hasn't that happened with the Ontario Party?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors. I think the Liberals have had an advantage over us because they've been in power for so much longer and been able to get MPPs elected, represented from those communities. So they have a lot of assistance in reaching out to those communities. We're struggling a little bit because we don't have those elected members. We have candidates and we try our very best, but when you're in opposition, I think it also boils down to a little bit what Rod is saying. We have the right policies. The people of these ridings connect to us. We just don't know how to outreach to them to get them to understand what we're trying to say and what our policies are. So again, it's having enough MPPs to do that representation, and it's not an excuse.
But Harper and Kenney were doing it before they were in government, right? They started that process well before.
And also, Steve, I do believe that Frank Cleese was offered that position to be the Jason Kenney of. And I don't know if this is inside baseball, but I definitely had that information from our own riding association. I believe he was offered that role and he turned that down.
Well,
he
we've
wanted
had an excellent
the
MPP
cabinet.
like Todd Smith, who's taken that role for outreach, and he's done a fantastic job.
Works
He's
really hard at
relatable.
that.
He works very hard at that, and I think he's done a fantastic job. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing is there's a natural issue mix as well for some communities on the national scene. Little things like immigration. I know as a Ukrainian, politics has never really been talked about in my community as a community. And again, different cultures and different parts of the world view politics very differently. But among the Ukrainian community, talking about politics is not your average thing. I got to tell you, it has been in the last year and a half because of Stephen Harper's outstanding commitment to democracy in the Ukraine. And I'm not sure that any prime minister prior to Stephen Harper could even tell you the Ukraine existed, let alone the name of it.
Oh, you know what? I'm sure he's not watching, but if Brian Mulroney were watching, he'd say he was the first leader in the world to recognize Ukraine's independence.
Okay, then I take that back.
Okay,
All right.
we got a few.
I wanted to quickly say something, touch on what you were both talking about, you and John, about the small C and the the liberal and the whatever, the blue tent. And I think some of us forget what Mike Harris first ran on and was very successful in winning, and that was ending the Ray days. So he actually, ironically enough, mobilized the public sector. And then obviously from there, and then of course he made those cuts internally, and then it was a disaster after that. But we can't forget that. So it actually did start. It didn't end with Mike Harris. In fact, Mike Harris was very much the red Tory when he first ran. He ended the Ray days, and he promised effective conservative government. And that's what we need to get back at. We need to bring. We can't polarize. We've become the rural party, and then the Win has become the urban party. Yeah. And that is not leadership on either side. No. We have got to bring people together.
A couple of minutes left here. I want to finish off with something that all of your friends, Chris Stockwell, former Speaker of the Legislature, former Cabinet Minister, he was here on election night, and he sent us some of his thoughts, which we published on our website a few days after the election. Here's what he said. My advice to my Conservative friends is resist the message of the center left, including move to the middle or moderate your views. It's important for everyone to know right now that we, the Ontario PCs, were and still are right. We had the most honest and coherent plan. It was neither easy to sell nor appetizing to the general public. Did we completely screw up the messaging? Yes. Did we have a leader who connected with the public? No. Did we lose the election? Yes. All of these things may be true, but let us make sure we remember in 4 years this province will need a principled Conservative party prepared to speak the truth and derail this financial debacle. What do you think?
I don't disagree with him, but I do disagree with the premise that he's talking about two sides of the Conservative Party that aren't mutually exclusive to each other, right? So he's saying don't move away from your being financially and fiscally responsible and doing the right things and talking about the right things. But I don't think that we need to do that at the expense of talking about the things that appeal to people's hearts and their minds.
John?
And we want to be really careful about oversimplification. I mean, there's the old axiom, you won the election, therefore everything you did was right. And you lost, therefore everything you did was wrong. Yeah. And that's absolutely not the case. Because of that analysis was true, then somebody would be writing that the way for the Conservatives to win the next election based on the Liberal plan would be to say we will be more corrupt, we will be more incompetent, we will be more scandal-ridden than they were. No, we're not going down that road.
Pam?
You know what, I think if you look at the Liberal government today, a lot of their policies are very similar. Like, I think they plan on cutting some jobs, right? The same thing. So what it's all about here is that you do have to stick to your policy, but again, for me, it's a big issue about communicating it effectively and reaching out to those people and connecting with them. Come across what's important to them and focus on that.
20 seconds left. The next leader of the party should be?
Somebody who is dynamic. It should be a woman, someone who can communicate, connect emotionally with people.
Someone who's youthful and has lots of great ideas.
Want to give me a name?
I haven't seen all the names that are out there yet. Yeah.
John?
I'll have the list, I'll show you after.
Okay.
But someone who can win.
Yeah.
I think it's experience and that human side.
Gotcha. Good of all four of you to come in tonight and help us out with this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.